Stay frosty and head over to EasyMut.com for the cheapest MUT coins on the market. And when I say cheapest, I mean it. We're talking 1 million coins for around 40 bucks. Use code DIRECTOR for 5% off. Yo, what up, brothers? It's the Director Bolt fam. We did it. 3 days. 17 hours worth of streaming. We did it. The Los Angeles Chargers 2021 NFL Draft has now concluded. Oh my God, dudes. Can you believe what we witnessed this weekend? Some of the choices, obviously, absolutely insane. Perhaps even a little bit lucky. Other choices, maybe we're scratching our heads a little bit. But now that we've had time for the dust to settle a little bit, emotions maybe not running as high, having time to maybe sit, digest, watch a little film, read some articles, fully understand what had happened this weekend, maybe we can formulate a final grade opinion on how the Chargers did this weekend. Wow, guys, what an experience. Just really quick, you guys know that for the last couple of days, the first 2 days of the draft, we were averaging like 2,000 people a day on the live stream. 2,000 dedicated Chargers fans jumping in and supporting the team. Wow, I could not be more proud. And the last day, we were well over 1,000 fans as well. Guys, bravo to you. Thank you, everybody, for all the support. I would call that a smashing success and a really good time with the Bull fam, man. I could not have imagined a more fun experience, more fun way to enjoy the NFL draft than with all of you fine people. So today's video, we're going to be going over every single draft pick for the Los Angeles Chargers and giving them a, I wouldn't say a first initial thought grade, but a grade. I've had a little bit of time to think about it. A grade for every single one of these draft picks. Which ones the Chargers absolutely smashing hit on, and other ones that maybe left us a little bit confused. But I think I've got a good understanding as to why the picks transpired the way they did, even the ones that weren't as exciting. So before we do get started, guys, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this content. The small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into this video. Lights, camera, action. Not gonna lie, I'm feeling a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs today, boys. We just came off the end of the stream. I've had some time to sit down, take a look, maybe study a little bit on some of the guys that I hadn't watched a ton of tape on or anything like that. And it's been a long grind, man. It's been a long grind, but I'm very excited to finally step back and take a big look, a picture. A look at the big picture of the Los Angeles Chargers draft when all things are said and done. So let's get started with round number 1, pick number 13, Rashaan Slater. Oh boy, you guys were there. I mean, you had to be there to remember how crazy, how wild the chat was going, how insane I was going when the Chargers did land one of the best offensive line prospects in the draft. And honestly, some people will say that he simply fell in our laps, which, yeah, in a sense, that could be true. But I feel like there's also got to be some sort of awareness by Tom Telesco and the staff to maybe hold tight, sit tight, and not panic trading up to grab Rashaan Slater, maybe at 8 or 9, you never know. There's a lot of teams moving in front of us, and it could have triggered maybe a panic move by the staff to try and go up and get Rashaan Slater while also losing some draft capital. But in a post-draft interview, we did get to hear a little bit about Tom Telesco's process, and they felt very confident that they knew who the teams were going to be taking in front of us and decided to stay put and hope for the best with Rashaan Slater. And at one point, they were really confident that Rashaan Slater would be there at 13. That's A+ awareness from the staff, Tom Telesco, even Coach Staley on that front. So I cannot imagine a better scenario, a better value for the Chargers in round 1. You guys know it because we've been talking about Rashaan Slater all off-season long. Graded very, very closely, sometimes even over Penei Sewell, the top tackle prospect in this draft. Of course, it depends on who you ask, who's better, Sewell or Slater. Me, personally, I still do think it's Sewell, but it was very, very close. I mentioned all the time, guys, that tackles to me were in pretty much 2 tiers as far as what the Chargers should be targeting. Yeah, tier A, the number 1 tier, guys. Tier A of Rashaan Rashaan Slater and Penei Sewell. And then you had your tier B guys. And I was talking a lot about trading down to get a B guy if they all kind of felt like in the same range for the Chargers. We ended up walking away with the tier A offensive tackle for the Chargers. Of course, he does have some concerns as far as his length, his size, but his talent more than makes up for any sort of lack of size that he may have coming into the NFL, to a point where he may end up being, a lot of people are saying, the most ready now offensive lineman in this draft to come in and make an immediate impact. And Chargers fans, I'm telling you this right now, the stark difference between Rashaan Slater and, let's say, the guys we had last season, Sam Tevi, Trey Pipkins, it will be very, very noticeable. One of the fastest offensive linemen in the draft. He's going to open up space on the outside. It's going to be very evident that this offense just got a huge shot in the arm with the presence of Rashaan Slater. No capital required to trade up. Chargers stayed put. They got themselves the best value, and it turned out to be one of the best combinations of position of need and best player available. Chargers slam dunk pick in the first round. So for that, we are going to be giving the pick of Rashaan Slater an A+. Welcome to the Bolts, Rashaan Slater, brand new left tackle of the future for the Los Angeles Chargers. And of course, a lot of this artwork is coming in from different sources on Twitter. The first one, a lot of it coming in from Charger Swap, one of my favorite accounts, but we're going to be going through a little bit of this, just kind of help you guys get a visual of how pumped we all are about our new Chargers coming to the team. Next up, Asante Samuel Jr. Okay, Chargers fans, yeah, I made a video the morning of day 2. I told you guys, hey, here are all my top prospects I hope the Chargers can get. I talked a lot about Asante Samuel, and in my mind, the Chargers were almost certainly going to have to give up some draft capital to trade up and go get Asante Samuel. And the reason I was so convinced that Asante Samuel was their guy was because of how many times that the Chargers had met with him. I think it was something like 2 or 3 times that he had met with the team. So I was pretty much convinced that the Chargers were getting ready to submit a draft trade package to maybe a team as high as 36, maybe the Dolphins, to go get Asante Samuel. Now, of course, we did start seeing some corners come off the board. Tyson Campbell came off the board. I think there's a couple other ones that went before Asante Samuel. Maybe a good reason for that. Maybe some of those guys don't fit the schemes of those teams as well as Asante Samuel does with the Chargers. Maybe it's his size a little bit. Again, maybe a little bit undersized, but just like Rashaan Slater, more than makes up with it with his size. And honestly, one of the best playmaking man coverage cornerbacks you're going to find in this draft. Perfect fit for Staley's defense is now on the Chargers. And again, fills another position of need without having to trade up. I cannot reiterate this enough, guys. This is, again, one of the best case scenarios for the Chargers back-to-back in rounds 1 and 2. Asante Samuel felt like he was always the guy. He was mock draft, including by me, to the Chargers over and over and over again because how much of a perfect fit he was, how much the Chargers had met with him. And lo and behold, it did come to pass, and we are very, very fortunate to have him on this team. The Chargers starting corners at this point, Mike Davis, Chris Harris Jr., and Asante Samuel. You throw in Derwin James, Nasir Adderley. Hey, that's a really, really good defensive backcourt in the NFL. So you cannot help but give this a plus grade for the Chargers. 2 A+ picks back-to-back. And honestly, it could not have worked better for Chargers fans. Now let's work into the first maybe curveball pick of this NFL draft for the Chargers. It threw a lot of people off, including me, with Josh Palmer, wide receiver out of Tennessee. Okay, so initially when we made this pick, I'll be honest, Palmer was really not on my radar that high. I think, me personally, I think I had him graded somewhere between rounds 5 and 7, and the Chargers ended up taking him with our first third round pick at 77. So initially, I wasn't too hyped. I was like, I feel like the Chargers could have definitely got this guy maybe in the 4th or 5th round if we really wanted him. At worst, maybe go up and get him with our second third round pick at 97. So I felt really anxious that this was a pretty bad reach. And I was convinced that maybe this wasn't the best pick for the Chargers. But again, you got to step away from the situation for a second and really give it a good look to make sure that before labeling anybody a bust. And Josh Palmer, to me, the more I looked into him as a player, the more I looked into the situation with the Chargers, the kind of wide receivers that they're looking for, the more I fully started to understand what he is and why the Chargers decided to select him so high. This man went up against some of the best talent in college football when it comes to corners and defensive backs. He's burned Patrick Surtain, J.C. Horn, other top-tier DBs in football. And I feel like that made a huge impression on the staff of the Chargers. It's not what his production was in Tennessee, but rather his performance versus some very, very good competition, of which he very much so shined. And it really seemed like the more I looked into him, the more I realized how big of a name he is in the league versus he is with the fans. Went under the radar for a lot of fans. There's very few guys that really were high on him. One guy that I really have to praise is Stephen Hagland of the Guilty as Charged podcast. He's one of the few guys I even heard mutter the name Josh Palmer. And really it's because the talent is there, but he was held back by bad quarterback play and terrible coaching. The kind of upgrade that he's about to see at quarterback, almost like going from Uncle Rico to Justin Herbert, is going to benefit Josh Palmer insanely, okay? And honestly, the Chargers, it really feels like this may be a contingency plan in case something happens with Mike Williams, be it an injury. Maybe he doesn't make it on the team next year after playing on his fifth-year option. It feels like a contingency plan for Josh Palmer. And there's some things that Josh Palmer might do better than even a Mike Williams. It's kind of crazy to think we're talking about a third-round pick versus a first-round pick, but that's kind of talent that people see in Josh Palmer. He's being compared to a Jordy Nelson, by the way, if that helps you understand the kind of upside people are seeing in him. So in my consensus opinion, is consensus even the right word? I'm too tired to even bring good vocabulary to the video today, guys. I'm going to give him a final grade of a C+, not for the player, but because of where he was selected. I think the player himself could end up being a diamond in the rough, a gem of this draft, but I still think the Chargers took him a little too high, so it's going to be a C+ for me. I feel like the Chargers could have definitely got him in the late third, if not the early fourth, instead of, I would say, reaching for him in the third round. Either way, very excited to see him join the Chargers. Welcome to the Bolts, and honestly, I think he's got a future with this team as far as maybe an X-receiver, a number 2 receiver for the Chargers. And I'm very excited to see what he brings to the squad in the near future. Next up, we got Tre McKitty. Back-to-back head scratchers. I know, Chargers fans. We were all there. We're like, Tre McKitty, what? A lot of people were very excited, maybe with the thought of Brevin Jordan joining the Chargers. But upon further investigation, it seems that Brevin Jordan graded very, very terribly. And maybe that's why he fell so hard in the draft this season. Outside of that, Tre McKitty's actually a guy that I definitely could see the Chargers going after before the draft. Maybe just not this high. This may have been an obvious draft for need pick. The Chargers with a couple of really good tight ends on the roster already. In Jared Cook, very good vertical threat tight end. Chicken Parm, again, a good vertical threat, very tall guy. And then Steven Anderson, also really good receiving tight end. What they're really missing at this point is a blocking tight end. And it feels like the Chargers knew from day one that they would have to go get their blocking tight end in the draft. Now, be it Tre McKitty isn't the best blocking tight end in this class, but he's certainly an improvement over everybody else we have on the roster right now. As of right now, Tre McKitty is probably the best blocking tight end on the roster. Did they maybe reach to go get that blocking tight end? Yeah. I felt that he was more of a fourth at the most, maybe a fifth-round pick, projected even to the Chargers. I felt like Tre McKitty could have definitely been a good pick for them even before the draft, but I think it is still a reach. He's got nice vertical speed, maybe a lack of route running. Does compare actually a little bit to Jared Cook outside of his route running, and I think he's going to be a very good Chargers tight end in the future, but still, with all that being said, I still feel like it was a reach. So I'm going to give the pick a C, but I certainly see Tre McKitty having a very good role with the Chargers later down the road. Tight ends take a little longer to develop, so it may be a minute till we see him step into that role, but I think it's good for the Chargers to get that guy on the roster, begin developing him now. Okay. Next up in round 4, this ended up being one of my favorite picks of the draft. Here we got Chris Rumph II, edge out of Duke. Perhaps one of the best scheme fit edge rushers for the Chargers in this draft. He's one of those rotational players, very slippery, situational pass rushers. Very, very versatile. You can play him all over that defensive line. And honestly, I think he's going to have a fantastic career with the Chargers. The Chargers, in moving to 3-4, needed a very specific skill set of players to enter the roster. Enter Fackrell with the Chargers. Nwosu's going to have a really good season, I believe. And Chris Rumph, definitely one of those guys that fits the mold beautifully. A Staley pick, obviously, in my mind. He does need to put on a little weight in my mind. I think he's probably a little bit lanky for what you're asking. It's interesting. On the Draft Network, he was listed at 225, whereas on NFL Network today, he was listed at 244. So maybe he's been working on bulking up. But honestly, man, he had some crazy good production out there at Duke. I think this is going to work out very nice. He actually gives himself similar traits to Von Miller and Khalil Mack. And honestly, again, if that kind of paints a picture for the kind of player that we got in Chris Rumph, he's obviously not going to be those two players, but he wants to play the game in a very similar style. And that's really what it comes down to. Brandon Staley's looking for a very specific skill set, and Chris Rumph, in my mind, definitely fits that mold. I believe he's going to be a huge impact player for the Chargers in the next couple of seasons. I do feel like they're going to rotate him in a lot this season in his rookie year to really see what he has and see how long it's going to take for him to take a starting role with the team. But man, this one I really, really, really liked. I was nervous going into day 3 in round 4 because I was a little bit shocked to maybe some of the reaches we saw in day 2. But honestly, this is one where I felt really, really good about it right off the bat. So I'm going to give this one a grade of an A-. Very, very close to an AA+. Ultimately, I think there was a couple of other guys on defense that maybe graded out a little better, but as far as scheme fit and what he can bring to the table in the next couple of years, it's got to be an A- for me. Next up, guys, round 5, a guy that honestly, again, not on my radar, but I'm super happy the Chargers decided to add. His name is Brenden Jaimes, offensive tackle out of Nebraska. Excellent, excellent depth piece. When coming into the draft, a lot of Chargers fans had one thing on their mind, a couple of things on their mind, but one of them being offensive line depth. The Chargers, just terrible luck when it comes to injury, especially on that offensive line. The Chargers elect to try and add some of that depth in the 5th round, and honestly, again, a guy that wasn't on my radar, but when you look into him, he had a fantastic career in Nebraska. Projects as a guard in the NFL, maybe a little bit smaller. I thought he was like 6'5" or something like that, but maybe shorter arms, but still really good depth in the interior part of that offensive line. Somebody in my chat said this, confirmed, maybe this is wrong, I don't know, but somebody mentioned that he had 1,440 snaps with only allowing 7 sacks. Honestly, guys, you kind of round that out to how many games are played in a season, how many snaps he's taken each season. I think that's pretty good numbers, and I think he could actually compete for the starting job with Oday Aboushi. So Brandon Staley talked about getting a competition in early for Debussy. I think Brenden Jaimes might actually be the guy for that. So for me, I love me some excellent depth at offensive line. Very versatile guy, can play all over the line. That was kind of the name of the game for Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco. Get versatile players all over this roster, because if something were to happen, you can easily move things around and still have a very competent offensive line for the Los Angeles Chargers. So I'm actually going to give this one a B+. At first, I felt maybe that was a little too high, but you can't overestimate the importance of having nice depth in the offensive line. I think it's very vital that was something that was addressed, and the Chargers took care of it in the 5th round. Next up, in round 6, we had 2 picks in the 6th round. Nick Niemann, linebacker out of Iowa. Initially, again, a guy that wasn't on my radar. There were certainly some really, really good players still on the board if you're talking a linebacker. I don't know if Jabril Cox was still there, but I remember feeling, I wish it would have been maybe a different defensive player that could contribute a little bit more in year 1. But to me, again, instantly when I looked him up, I started reading up on him, watching some tape. He seemed very tall, very fast, big physical presence that I think is being targeted in the 6th round purely for special teams. Chargers fans, how often did we see the special teams unit in 2020 mess up the game to a point of no return? I feel like it's very intelligent for the Chargers to be targeting special teams players in the later rounds. It is a little bit of a head scratcher because there are some guys that I feel like could contribute on special teams that maybe had bigger upside as far as depth and maybe even starting potential. But still, I feel like it's something that needed to be addressed, and Nick Niemann could definitely add some value on that front. Excellent depth. I would say maybe adds decent depth at linebacker, but more importantly, adds some playmaking to special teams. If he's going to be in any way, shape, or form competing for, let's say, depth or even starting time with the Chargers, he needs to work on his coverage a bit. So I'm going to give this one a grade of a C+, simply because I feel like there was more impactful defensive players still on the board. But as a player and what he's going to bring to the table and his role with the team, I think it's still a pretty good pick, and he's going to add value to the Chargers. But a C+ for me, just because of where he was picked in the draft. This next one, I'm hoping not to ramble on too long, but I'm going to tell you, this is the one pick this season that I actually did not like. We don't have a jersey swap, unfortunately, for this one, but this is going to be in round 6 with pick number 198, Larry Roundtree III, running back out of Missouri. Again, I just see this guy as maybe a running back 3 or 4 on the Chargers with special teams upside. It comes to a point where, yes, special teams needs to be addressed, but I saw other running backs on the board that were maybe more valuable immediately to the Chargers as a rotational guy. And whereas Larry Roundtree, to me at least, it's going to be very, very interesting to see if he could even compete with Justin Jackson and Joshua Kelly for that running back 2 spot. Even running back 3, in my opinion, is going to be a tough bet for Larry Roundtree. But again, watching him a little bit, maybe in open space he's a little bit better, and he might actually start for the Chargers as far as a kick returner. So again, maybe focusing a little too heavily on special teams, but he could add some value in special teams, and maybe that's why the Chargers were targeting him. Me personally, I know a lot of Chargers fans felt like they wanted a running back to come out of this class, and honestly, I kind of did too, but undrafted. I was very happy to see the Chargers, or to think that the Chargers might be able to go out and find a nice undrafted free agent that could compete for starting time with the Bolts backfield instead of using a draft pick on it. But again, it's a 6th-round pick. It's not like we're trading up in the 3rd round to go get this guy. Yes, it's not my favorite pick, but he could add some special teams value. He does run violently. Maybe he could develop into a goal line kind of back. But for me, this is going to get a grade of a D. And finally, the Chargers in the 7th round decide to select Mark Webb, defensive back out of Georgia. I say DB. He's listed as safety, but he also played corner for Georgia. He's actually an ex-wide receiver, big-bodied, might have better hands than most other DBs because of him playing receiver in the past. All in all, I think he's got good traits, good size, good athleticism, but he's very new to the position of defensive back. Still, when I heard his name called, I was confused at first because he wasn't on my radar, but then I saw the position. I was like, oh, thank God, yes. The Chargers so desperately needed depth at safety, needed depth at corner, and I do think that Mark Webb does check a lot of boxes. He's more of a project, but really we're talking 7th round. He's going to fit the team as far as depth where we need it, and if he develops into something special, that's great. If he helps in special teams, that's great, but I just wanted some bodies in there for that safety position. So I'm going to give this one a grade of a C+. I like his measurables. I like the fact that he was an ex-receiver. I think he could bring some value to the Bolts. So in the end, what is going to be my final grade for the Los Angeles Chargers in the 2021 draft? Honestly, guys, it's probably going to shock you because I feel like there's a lot of head scratchers in this draft for the Chargers. I'm going to give this draft an A-, and simply because of the gravity of the impact of the first 2 rounds for the Chargers. I think it more than makes up for maybe some of the sketchier picks that we saw later on. We really do need to account how much weight that those picks carry for the Chargers. Coming into this draft with positions of need at left tackle and cornerback, we got some of the best prospects throughout the first 2 rounds for those 2 specific positions of need without having to give up any draft capital. Here's something I asked my chat during the live stream today. What if the Chargers, in a different reality, made it out with Asante Samuel and Rashaan Slater, but they had to give up day 2 and day 3 picks in order to make that happen? How would we view that draft? I think us as Chargers fans would say, you know what, the Chargers did what they needed to do to go get their guys. This is an A+ draft all the way. We kind of live in the same reality, but they didn't have to give away any picks. And the picks that we did pick, maybe some of them underwhelming, are still there. They're still adding value to the team. Does that kind of make sense? So I feel like looking at it through those lenses, with the gravity that the first 2 picks are providing to the team, I had to raise the grade a little bit. Initially, I felt like it was a B if you really just like kind of equally graded out, if every single pick was kind of equal, right? But because of how much weight the first 2 picks carried, I had to bring it up to an A-, man. This team is undoubtedly so much better because of Asante Samuel, Rashaan Slater, and a lot of these other guys are going to add a lot of value as well, dudes. I feel like, again, Josh Palmer may end up being a steal in this draft. I feel like Tre McKitty is going to develop into something later and add blocking value immediately. Chris Rumph was an excellent pick. Brenden Jaimes is definitely a solid depth option. Nick Neiman, great special teams. All these guys, decent special teams. So to me, the Chargers are walking away from this draft with their heads held high and very excited to compete in the 2021 NFL season. The Chargers now have a very complete-looking roster and are going to afford themselves to add even more playmakers in 2022 with a lot of cap space under their belts because the holes are not as obvious this season. So A- for me for the Chargers 2021 NFL Draft. In the comment section below, let me know what you guys think of the Chargers picks. Are some of them maybe being graded a little too high, maybe being graded a little bit too low? Let me know what you guys think. You can even list all the players and put a letter grade next to them as well. I want to know what the Chargers consensus feeling is on this. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been the Director. Super excited to get into more content, guys, very soon. Undrafted free agents, I'm looking into those tonight. We'll see if we can get a breakdown of them soon. Well, guys, again, thanks for joining me. This has been the Director. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty.